Gentlemen, welcome back to the Front Row Dad podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend and a Front Row Dad brother, Josh Goodman. I wanted to have this conversation because Josh just put out a book called Tap the Big Idea, Creating a New Category in the World's Oldest Industry. Killer title, by the way. But Josh is a family man first and also happens to be an epic businessman. If you read his bio, which we will share on the show notes page, you'll see that he's an athlete, he's an achiever. So is his wife, by the way, who they both still hold records for their athletic performance at the universities where they attended and played in their respective sports. And the thing about Josh is that he has such a positive spirit and he's such a hard worker. But you also get the sense that his ego, he's aware of his ego. Because I'll never say people like get rid of their ego or they don't have an ego, because we all have one. It's there. Josh just seems to have a good relationship with his. And when he's in a room, he's not dominating other people. He's curious and he's learning and he's lifting and he's constantly connecting with others because people want him to be connected. And as a result of that, he's built an amazing life for himself, including his business, which we'll get into in just a minute, which is really cool, really unique. And sometimes when I'm at restaurants or Dave & Buster's or these other locations, I see something that's there. This is me teasing out the business idea. And I'm like, Josh Goodman, that's his work right there. I'll bet you that's Josh's work. Josh, thanks for being on the show, man. It's good to be spending some time with you. Thanks for making time.
Could not imagine a better way to spend my day right now.
Well, and I also know you're going to be traveling down here to record the audio for your book, and I'm going to be pumped to see you in person as well, which will be cool. And am I going to see you at one of the retreats coming up? Are you going to be?
Yeah, my wife made it clear that I have to go to these retreats, because when I came back, she was like, "You're going to get signed up for the next 5 years. Where do I pay? Where do I sign?"
I love it, man. Let's start by talking. It's a great segue to talk about your family. Tell us who's at home. Tell us a little bit about the Goodman crew.
So the Goodman crew, as you noted, my wife and I met in college. We both played sports. We were on scholarship at Shippensburg University, her for basketball, me for football. We did, in fact, set school records. That wasn't necessarily our goal or intention. It just happened that way. The even more serendipitous thing is that her career record in steals is the exact same number for my career record in solo tackles.
No way.
We need to get that number like cemented on our house.
That's awesome. What is the number, by the way?
211.
211.
So yeah, 211.
All right, magic
number. So like anyone that meets their future wife or husband in college, you evolve, but we ended up, both going into sales right out of college. Me, Cutco, her drugs. So the knives and the drugs, nice combo. And then, as far as the family, we made the natural progression of townhome to getting our, building a house or whatever, and then got a dog, and then we started having kids. So we now have a 13-year-old boy named Tyler and an 11-year-old girl named Bria and a 4-year-old golden doodle named Belle.
Dude, what's going great for you on the personal side? I know there's some big stuff in the business and we'll get to that, but when it comes to your personal life, what can we celebrate with you? What's a win as a family man?
I think presence. I take a lot of inspiration from the Front Row Dads through, Instagrams that I follow, like Jesse Itzler, things like that, but just being present. One of the things, like my daughter yesterday, she asked, Dad, can we go jump on the trampoline? And when you see the joy in their face, just to do something as simple as that. And I don't want to throw most dads under the bus, but I don't think most dads that are in their 40s are doing front flips, back flips, double bouncing their kids. But I always like that concept of never say you're too tired to play with them, because you don't have any more years of them asking to play with you like that. Yeah. So I would say just being able to drop everything and do that when they do ask me to play with them, it's a lot of fun. I would also say my son, I think I shared this in one of the membership conversations, but seeing him recognize that when he puts the work in, he gets the reward. he started to connect the dots there. Having two parents that have done what we did in athletics, that we've never told him we expect him to do anything that we did. We just want him to see him do well and have fun. And seeing him ask, "Hey, I want to go can you drop me off at the Y for 2 or 3 hours or whatever?" And he's showing that level of commitment that, again, we're not putting the pressure on him to do, but it's encouraging for my wife and I to see that he's putting the two together, put work in, get a result. So, but yeah, personally, that's, I'm also, it's funny. So we're going to Lake Tahoe in a few weeks for President's Day. And one of the activities that I've always loved is doing things active with our family. So whether it's hiking or whatever, but for me, skiing, or I snowboard and they all ski, all of us being on like a ski lift together and then going down a mountain together, like there's a certain level of, I guess you could say, zen that comes with that experience. And so sadly, we haven't done that the last few years because the pandemic, and then, we'll talk about it later, but my son's surgery. And so this is our first kind of family gathering where we're going to fly across the country and ski for 3 or 4 days during President's Day weekend. So just booking the trip, I was actually super excited, because I was like, we're going to go back to that place,
That's awesome, man. Yeah. On the flip side of what's positive, what was challenging, I know, in your world, and you just mentioned it, is your son's surgery. Talk to us about that, man, because that was a very difficult time for you. And I think this for sure shows the contrast to fatherhood. Those moments where you might be climbing the mountain, and others, and you're sliding down. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster, to say the least. And without giving away, I guess, the build up to what my company does, we do self-serve drinks. So go to bars and restaurants and you can pour your own beer, wine, cocktails, non-alcoholic. Been building that business for a few years. And then in 2020, I actually sold 25% of my company to Coca-Cola, which was a pretty big accomplishment considering, 6 years prior, it was just me and I was 100,000 in debt. But, getting to that point where, wow, I've made it, quote unquote, air quotes. But then that was September of 2020, which was just during the pandemic, where all of our customers closed down and everything was a mess. But then 2 months after that, I was out doing an installation. And just to give everyone the full story, my son was born with a lipoma on his back. So it's a fatty piece of tissue. It was just sitting above his butt crack. It was just kind of like this thing he had. But we always said, if you ever want to get that taken off, like, it's cosmetic, it's a 2-day surgery, or it's a 2-day recovery, because it's just going in there and taking the fat out. And so he said, yeah, I want to get it out. And so we took him, got an MRI, and they came back and gave us the test results. They said, hey, well, we found something else that's on his spine. It's a lipoma as well. We need to do testing and see if it's impacting his nerves in any way. So we did the testing, and I'll never forget, I was at a project in Indiana, and my wife and I were on a call with the neurosurgeon, and she said, your son has an 11-inch tumor on his spine and it's impacting his nerves, and it could result in him never walking again if we don't address this. And I mean, I'm getting chills just repeating it right now, but it was scary. You go from this extreme high of, I've just closed the largest deal I've ever closed in my life, to 2 months later, my son may never walk again if we don't get a surgery. So like I think a lot of couples do, you kind of sit back and you assess. And there's a gentleman named Jason Kalipa. He's like a world-renowned CrossFit guy. Met him at one of those mastermind events. Great guy, but he wrote a book called As Many Reps as Possible. And he went through something, I would say, more extreme when he found out his daughter Ava had cancer, like stage 4. And I'll never forget the part. He said he was just bawling uncontrollably, and his wife's, said, outside of the hospital room, look, we cannot show her any of this. Like, she has to see positivity. She has to see this is not life-threatening. This is something we're just going to get through. And he got that pep talk. And I would say I got a similar pep talk, but having that knowledge of that in the background helped us kind of process, all right, so what's the next steps? So we realized that we had to, he couldn't get the surgery like the next day. So this is December, early December. So we scheduled it for, I believe it was February 7th or February 11th or 13th of 2021. But we lived in Chicago at the time. So anyone that lives in Chicago or has lived in Chicago, January is not an awesome month to be a parent in Chicago, especially during a pandemic where your kids are learning from home every day. So we were like, we don't have to take him to school, so, and it's cold, so you can't do anything. What should we do for the month of January? Let's move to Palm Harbor, Florida. So we packed my F-150 up, took the dog and the bikes and drove down to Palm Harbor, Florida for the month of January. And we kind of turned a really, really crappy situation into, I would say, probably one of the most memorable experiences of our kids' young lives. We lived on the coast of Florida. We got to see the sunset every night. We got to swim and do, fun things, but all the while knowing that when we moved back to Chicago after this little month-long vacation, which having your kids do homeschool and then having their cousins visit you, so you have 5 kids under the age of fifth grade or doing homeschool, I took video because it was insane, but we did it. It was fun. But then we moved back and, we knew that he had to have this surgery. So there 2.5 feet of snow when we moved back, but then we took him to the hospital. And I'll never forget it. He was more nervous about putting the needle in his arm than the actual surgery. And the surgery, they preface it. They say, look, this sounds terrible, but they're going to open up his spine like a lobster, where you crack the lobster, take out all the bad lobster meat, and then they're going to close it back up. And when you look at it that way, it sounds pretty crazy, but essentially that's what they did. They opened up his back, they took all the bad meat out, they closed it up. It was supposed to be a 7-hour surgery. So my wife and I were sitting in the emergency room waiting area for it was supposed to be 7 hours. It ended up being 11. So as 2 people sitting in a room for 11 hours, that was taxing, but they gave us updates, and the surgery went perfect. The doctor told us it took longer than expected, but that she got every piece of the lipoma out, and he should have a full recovery and be a normal kid in the next 5 to 6 months. So that was just getting through that first part it was like, oh, breath of relief. We made it. And then we went and saw him after the surgery. He'd been on his on his chest for like 11 hours. He had bruises all over his face. It was tough to see. But as soon as he started coming to, the first thing he asked the neurosurgeon was, will I be able to play football again? And the neurosurgeon, she said, yeah, you will be able to, but as a neurosurgeon, I would suggest you play sports that don't involve slamming your head against each other. So it was kind of a funny moment. But what I forgot to mention leading up to it, the night before his surgery, and it's in the book, not to give it away, but he'd been researching a lot of things. I mean, kids, as you know, they look online, they see what they read about things. He'd read about what a will was. And prior to going through this, one of my business partners or business clients is Walk-Ons, and one of the owners of Walk-Ons is Drew Brees, the quarterback. And my son's a big Drew Brees fan. So he had a Drew Brees football that was generously given by them when they knew we were going through this. And he asked me, he said, hey, Dad, he said, if I don't make it through the surgery, I want you to have my Drew Brees football. And I was like, oh, dude, like, you're going to make it, man. Like, but hearing your 11-year-old son kind of basically will you something that he says is his most valuable possession. It was tough to swallow, man. Like, but made it through the surgery. My wife and I, we were great, going through that as great as you can be. Right. But then we took him home. They released him from the hospital. It was like 2 or 3 days or 3 or 4 days in the hospital. And the wound was so big. I mean, it was an 11-inch wound up his back, and it wasn't closing. So they said, look, if it's leaking white stuff, which I guess was like, your spinal fluid, then bring him back in right away. Like, we need to see it. So we ended up having to go back to the hospital. I want to say probably 2 or 3 days after they released us. So living in there for about a week. And then, they said, hey, keep stuffing this gauze like 2 inches into your son's back. And we were like, no, we're not doing that. So then they realized that was not going to solve the problem. So what they did is they installed something called a wound vac. And so what that does is it sucks the wound back together, and it's all, airtight and watertight. So it's constantly putting pressure on your back to close versus like expecting this gaping wound to just close on its own. So the poor guy had to go through 8 more surgeries where they had to put him under, move the wound back in. And so my wife and I lived for at least about a month in Lurie Children's Hospital in downtown Chicago. And that was tough. That, I would say, was the toughest part of this, whole experience. I mean, and we have a daughter, as well. So it was typically Jeanette was there for 2 days, and she, tagged me out, and then I was there for 2 days, and we were doing that for the entire time. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to run a company. Thankfully, I had and have great people in the organization that kind of took off the things on my plate that didn't need to be during that time period. And clearly my investors were understanding of the situation as well. But what was kind of cool throughout that whole process is the business actually did really well. So I think it really shined a light on some of that side of things, that everyone cares. But, going back to the hospital visits, I don't know, my wife probably wouldn't be cool with me saying this, but we had to set up like conjugal visits where we'd meet at a hotel for like an hour or two just in between our trade-off. Cause it's like, I think you've said it, sometimes you just have to F, right? Like,
yeah.
But it was, I think that just allowing some normalcy into the equation, and like letting us kind of like step away from the situation and just her and I be together versus like always around that situation was, we look back, we actually talk about that every once in a while, like how in the midst of all that, like we went and had lunch, and just still tried to keep that connection,
Right.
So that was a tough time, man. That was a really tough time, but I will say it gave me perspective that I probably wouldn't have had on appreciating the little things with him, doing, going, him and I would go on bike rides or scooter rides or, playing catch, things like that. Like the fact that we made it out of that and he's 100% healed, and seeing him play sports. And I was talking to, some of the other fellow front row dads at the last event, like just seeing him happy on a playing field, that brings me more happiness than you could ever imagine,
Did you guys get motorbikes too? I have this vision of like you on bikes.
We did. Oh yeah, that's a good point. So we moved back east. So we lived in Chicago for 7 years, from 2014 to 2021. And then my wife's family's from the outside of the Philadelphia area, or actually her family's from Wilkes-Barre, but her sister lives in Lansdale. And we moved back in 2021 in July, right near my son's birthday, which is the 26th. And everyone in our house got COVID except for him and I. So it was his birthday. We just moved back, and it's like, this poor guy, like his birthday is not going to happen, like as far as like having people over, because he didn't know anybody yet. And he'd been dirt bike riding with his cousins, and I grew up like with a little bit of a dirt bike in my background. And so we went to go buy dirt bikes, but you couldn't buy dirt bikes because everything was out, like nothing.
Everything sold out.
So then we went to Facebook Marketplace, and living outside of Philadelphia, you get to interact with some interesting people on Facebook Marketplace. So we took them, we mapped out like 10 dirt bikes he liked and a few that I might like, and he got to meet his first crackhead, which was a unique experience. Because the guy and it's funny, we still laugh about it. He was like, yeah, the guy was telling him to like hold his finger in the dirt bike while he's switching gears. Other than that, it works fine. And so we ended up getting 2 dirt bikes for his birthday, one for me, so it was kind of my birthday too, and one for him. And yeah, that became like a thing we did, because we're right near the Poconos and right near a bunch of like coal mine, tracks. So we would go up there. We did it for his birthday, and we just went riding for 2 or 3 hours, and just such a unique experience. There's not many dirt biking trails in Chicago, as you can imagine. So getting to kind of the rural, mountainous kind of back roads that was kind of a nice blessing.
How's he doing now? How's his health?
Great. He's playing basketball. He's doing he did football again this year. And he's just, I always joke with my wife, I'm like, you had sex with yourself to have our son, because I don't see a lot of me in him all the time, but like his grades, he's straight A kid, not that we're putting pressure on him to have straight A's. That's where my wife and I have a unique dynamic. I'm like, I was kind of a C/B student, A's were cool, but she was straight A's the whole way through everything. So, but yeah, he's doing great. He's a quiet kid, which, is not my personality. I tend to make friends, I guess, pretty quickly. So but he's really funny. Like he'll say some stuff that just kind of quick-witted, where like he was on a baseball team with a bunch of guys, and this kid on his team, I guess, got like a C in, a test they took. And as he was drinking the water, and I heard this because I was sitting right next to the bench, and he was like, "Hey, you should have probably had some of that water before your test the other day." And the brand on the water was smart water.
Yeah.
So he, just kind of like giving him a little dig. So it's kind of cool to see him making some friends, but it was a tough move. I mean, anyone that's moved their kids, I know you moved your kids, they were a little younger, but
It's tough.
moving your family is tough. And it's, you love to see them start making those friends and having those relationships, because that was such a key part of my childhood, having those strong relationships.
Yeah, man. I want to reflect back to you for a moment that a couple of things in here that just really make me smile. One is that he's healthy now. So I want to acknowledge that. That feels great. I want to acknowledge you for creating a life where you could be there for him in that moment. When we talk about family men with businesses, not businessmen with families, how does that play out in real life? Well, you just did it. You had a business that you built that, look, we're all about successful business. We're great to make money and help other people make money and add value to the world. Those are great things. And especially it's great when we as a brotherhood focus on creating businesses that aren't so dependent on you, because there are seasons of life when your family needs not only a part of you, they might need all of you to show up. And so, it's great to love our work and to be valuable there, contribute our gifts to the mission. But in seasons like what you went through, being able to go home, being able to be at the hospital, being able to take the time, you said things like, my investors were behind me. They, the team excelled. That's really an amazing sign of a healthy mission, of a healthy team, of healthy partnerships. So I really want to acknowledge you for your role in creating what led to the possibility of you just being there for your son. I also want to acknowledge you for the relationship with your wife as you navigated through this, that you recognize the importance of taking time for the two of you. And because that is a part of the health equation, the overall health equation of your family. It's like, it might feel like a sprint from time to time. Like you were definitely in a sprint season being in the hospital, but the overall process of family is a marathon, and you need to be continually taking care of yourself. Because what I see sometimes is that guys will completely sacrifice themselves for their family. And it's a noble thing when you hear it. They're like, forget about me, forget about my marriage. Like, this is what my son needs. And that may be true in certain moments, but it also can be like an unhealthy way to approach it, because, another way to think about that is, you do take care of yourself as a dad, you do take care of your relationship for your children, because again, this is a long game that we're playing in many cases. And so you just seem to be balancing a lot in that moment. And I really want to acknowledge you for that. And that, you're recognizing the value of these relationships. And then you're doing the very thing that you said in the beginning about being present, like the image of you and your son on these dirt bikes, just for hours, just riding and enjoying life together. Man, to me, that is where I think you're really winning in life, is that you're doing those types of activities that are often easy to not do, again, because work can pull you in, and the to-dos of life. So whatever it is, not everybody has maybe the resources or where they don't live in a place where, but it's not about the dirt bike. It's about whatever it is, right? Whatever you can do, whoever's listening to this, wherever you are with the resources that you have, it's just taking time for your family. So props to you, man. And I'm very, very happy to have heard the outcome here is one that's bright and positive. So yeah.
Yeah. And just to reflect on the dirt bike thing, like he'd never been exposed to dirt bikes before, so when his cousin said, "Hey, you want to try to ride mine?" it was cool to see him light up. It was I remember being that excited about a dirt bike, a go-kart, whatever it was. But I think that's where dads should, look for those little shine, brights of light, and then help them lean into it. Like it would not be fun for him to have a dirt bike on his own. But his dad having one and him saying, hey, let's go trail riding today, or whatever whenever it is. I mean, we went one time, it was like sunny in December, and he was like, can we put the dirt bikes on the truck and go riding? And it's like, yeah, let's do it. So it's kind of cool to, and again, going back to that whole theory of just like asking your wife or whatever out on a date before you started, you got married and everything. If you'd asked her out on a date 5 times and she said no 5 times, you might not have asked a 6th. And I look at that the same way with kids. If they ask you to play 5 times and you say no 5 times, they might not ask you that 6th time, or the 7th, or the 8th, or forever again. So I'm really conscious of that. And I know that, even if I can't physically play at that time, I'll recognize their ask, and I'll say, I do want to play with you right now. I can't currently, but I can in 25 minutes. Can we play in 25 minutes? It's just the reframing of it. So it's just, you're not just leaving it at no.
Yeah. Well, we were in a way hinting and transitioning to the story of your business here. And, this business is providing for you and your family. It's providing for your team and your staff. It's making an impact in the world in a very unique and cool way. So let's talk about this, because, dude, you got a book out, and I'm thrilled. By the way, a little connection here that I want to make too is you put this book together through Scribe, right?
Yes.
Through Scribe. And Tucker Max, who's one of our members, was one of the co-founders of what was originally called Book in a Box, right? And then
not to be confused
Scribe.
with Saturday Night Live's.
Yeah,
Box,
definitely
right?
Not to be confused. So very cool connection there. Let's go back and let's tell the story as you want to, with, like, we can tease the book. We don't have to give away the whole thing, but maybe let's start with, why did you write the book? Let's begin there. And then we can kind of back into the story.
So the funniest part is the part about Tucker. I'd never met Tucker. I'd read his emails and, hope they serve beer in hell, just kind of back in the day. But in 2018, I got invited to a mastermind event with Jason Gaynard, and it was in Park City, Utah. And the one morning they offered, if you wanted to go CrossFit with a world championship CrossFitter, or go do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So the one morning on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was sitting in the car next to this guy, and I introduced myself as, my name's Josh. He's like, my name's Tucker. I was like, that's an interesting name. The only Tucker I've ever heard is the guy that writes there's books about, like, banging girls and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, that's me. But he's obviously evolved since those books. And so that's, I don't want to say that's where this started, but like, then when he explained to me what, his business was, and it kind of planted the seed, like, okay, that doesn't seem as unachievable to write a book because of that business. So, but to go back to when the idea for the book really kind of took fruition, or took shape, it was March 2020. We'd already done a press release for the Coca-Cola investment that was going to happen in March of 2020. We got all the contracts signed, or the contracts weren't all signed. It was like one last contract to sign. Wire transfers were set up for this, 25% sale of the company. And then the pandemic hit, and investment didn't happen. Like, all of my customers shut down at the same time. All of my customers are restaurants and bars, which they didn't, do too well in March of 2020. So I'm sitting here with all this time. All right, well, support, we don't need that right now. So you're going to take the break and file for unemployment if you can. Sales, we'll pay you some commissions if you need them, but we can't do salaries right now because we don't know what's going to happen. Marketing, take a break. Don't really need to market to people right now, because what are you going to market? And I had this time, and I said, I've always said I want to write a book. Now I have insane amounts of time, and I just went full go. I mean, I didn't plan out the chapters. I just started typing, and I ended up typing around 250 pages, I guess, not right that day, but over the course of a few months. And then that's when I engaged with Scribe, and they helped me bring it from a bunch of, ideas and stories to an actual book. And so that was the, I wanted to intertwine the story of what I've been through in it as well. So people see that it's not this cake and ice cream, easy, everything came easy kind of thing. I've been screwed a lot. There's been a lot of bad decisions that I made along the way that I had to learn the hard way on those lessons. But I guess going back to the origin of it is, in the book, it talks about how I even came up with the idea, like tap the big idea. And it starts with a problem. If you've ever been at a bar or restaurant and you've ordered a drink, or you've gone to meet friends and it takes 10, 20, 30 minutes to get a drink, that happened to me. And instead of saying, I hope someone comes up with an idea to fix this, I said, I can figure this out.
Talk about where we are now is in the business. How is PourMyBeer doing?
So we're in the transition mode of going from PourMyBeer to PourMyBev. So I always joke and say we're liquid agnostic. We treat all liquids equally. But PourMyBeer is it's in a growth phase. I think a lot of people get into business thinking I'm going to get those enterprise accounts right off the bat. And I was naive, optimistically naive that was going to be us. But 2015, we didn't have the systems or the product that would allow it to scale. But I was out there selling, so it was just me. But now we're a team of 30. Everyone's fairly remote. We have 3 people that work in I'm actually having this conversation with you from our headquarters in Ambler, Pennsylvania. And we have over 430 customers active in the United States that use our technology. Some are completely self-service, where you can't get a drink at their places without using our technology. Others, it's an add-on. Dave & Buster's, you mentioned that they're in Austin. They have our technology. We've landed a national agreement with Hilton, so they've made us their brand standard for. They're calling it the Elevated Beverage Program. So if this all works out well, and we're listening to this podcast in a few years, we should be in a few thousand Hiltons across the United States, as well as the other. We're starting to do things with Hyatt and Best Western. And the general idea there is that your room card, the same card that you use to get in the room, allows you to pour your beer, your wine, your cocktails, your sodas, your cold brew coffees, your kombuchas, and it all automatically just posts onto your room charges. So that's exciting to see that start to take shape. And, we recently brought on a COO in September who very excited to bring on board. When you're a CEO is only as good as his collective team. And one of the things that has always been a need was get a COO that's scaled companies, taken companies to 50 million, 100 million. So I did my best Steve Jobs impersonation in selling David, our current COO, on coming on board. And I clearly did a good enough job. He's here. And it's like I don't know if you ever remember the movie Weird Science, where they created this perfect girl in a computer, and all of a sudden she shows up. Was it Kelly LeBlanc or something?
I don't remember the name. Yeah.
So that's. But
I definitely remember what she looked like.
Me too. So yeah, we created. David has a background in hospitality. His wife owned a catering business in Chicago, did really well. He scaled and sold a software company to a public company, and so it just really perfect fit for what we needed. And so him and I are actually flying to Austria on Monday. We have meetings with our partners in Austria. A big part of the story, as anyone that reads it, is if it was not for my partners in Austria, we would not be doing as well as we're doing. Having good partners who are good people, good family men. Herman, my business partner in Austria, he's got 2 kids, and he's been through some stuff with his kids as well, but he's at his core, very, very big into family. And we've always bonded over that. He's included me in some of their family trips when they come to Florida. And whenever I go over there, I always see his daughter and son and his wife. And, I think that people say, you know, business, keep it business. It's as personal as it gets. I think that's what allows trust to exist. I mean, even the contract to this day, which is not, you know, something I guess I should brag about, is very loose, and it's a 2-pager. But I've always trusted him. He's always trusted me. And I think that's important in any relationship. But yeah, as the business stands today, it's exciting. The thing that's tough for me is I don't get to deal with every customer. I don't get to deal with every project. And anyone that's ever worked with anybody in hospitality, they're very, very interesting people with great, you know, personalities that are bigger than their businesses. And I miss that part of it. I even think back to one of my first sales when I was just trying to get this thing off the ground. The gentleman, he owned a wine business where he sold, you know, bottled wine and bottled beer. And he had these relationships with Napa, where I'd never been to Napa Valley. And he said, "Oh, well, I'd love to be the first person to take you there." So I convinced my wife to fly out to San Francisco, and we all went to Napa with him and his wife, and we got like the behind the scenes experience. We were treated like we were the people buying millions of dollars of wine. Meanwhile, he was the one that was buying the millions of dollars of wine. And we were drinking 100-point, you know, or 99-point cabs, and, you know, private dinners and lunches and catacombs. And I remember, you know, Jeanette was like, "This is pretty cool," you know. But that's kind of the cool thing about the hospitality world, is when you make these connections that, you know, everyone just wants to have a good time. And so yeah, that's what I miss though. I don't get to have that tight connection with the customers, because now I'm worrying about, all right, well, what's the next role that we need to hire for? And, you know, what's our biggest threats in the marketplace? And, you know, and then having connections with other CEOs and hearing how they're handling certain situations or growth, you know, challenges they may have. So that's it's a process. I think, you know, I've got another level in the game I need to get to be as effective as I can be as we continue to grow. But it's fun, you know. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the learning. I'm enjoying the space that having a great team provides you to make bigger decisions, and still solving problems. It's funny. I know one of our newer team members, Matt, he was like, he spent a few hours on a problem, you know, which wasn't a crazy problem, but he was like, "Hey, how could we get this inventory from, you know, Baltimore to Chicago, or to Philadelphia?" And he's looking at all these logistics company. And I called a guy that I knew in Baltimore, and I said, "Hey, can I Venmo you like $200 to drive something to our warehouse?" And he was like, "Yeah, no problem." So instead of costing like $3,000 or whatever it was to transport something, it was solved for like a few $100s. So just little things like that, you know, helping them see how to solve certain problems that seem pretty basic, you know, but could be complicated if you let them.
Josh, the question that keeps rattling in my head is, after you drink a 99-point cab, like, is it just make everything else terrible? Like, can you drink wine at an average restaurant now?
Well, no. So it's funny that you mentioned that. So we got to go to 2 wineries. One was, to answer your question, it's kind of like seeing a game from the front row.
Yeah, that's right.
No pun intended. Tough to go back to the nosebleeds. But the gentleman that shared that wine with us, so he's the son of David Senegal, who started Costco. Mm-hmm. And so his only mission in opening Senegal Winery was to create 98 or 99-point wine. So he said he's got like a 900-step process patented. It was funny though, because when my wife and I met him, he looked like JFK Jr. He walked out, his shirt was like halfway undone. And I was like, "Jeanette, you're married, so like you gotta, right, we're here to remember." I was like, he's got a $30 million winery estate, and it looks amazing, and takes us. But anyway, so yeah, the wine was amazing. I will say I've never quite had, and I just said this to Jeanette the other night, the wine that I had there, I don't know if it was just that much better, or if it was just in a state of mind where it was like,
probably both.
It's just, you know, but there was a Sangiovese that I had there. I've never had a Sangiovese that's come remotely close to the one I had there, you know, so, but yeah.
That's fun. Sounds like when I'm hanging out with Justin Donald, you know, and the wines he's enjoying, it makes everything else more challenging. I know a mutual friend. Let's talk. I wanted to go somewhere and I just lost my train of thought here. Where did I want to go with this? Well, let's say this. For anybody that's heard the story thus far, they learned a little bit about you and they're wondering if they should get this book. What would you say to them? Why would somebody want to pick up Tap the Big Idea?
It's written in a way that whether you're in business or a teacher or, senior leadership or just a stay-at-home mom, like it's written in a way that it's going to take you from chapter to chapter. And I also believe you're going to learn things and you'll write down things to reference later that to remind you of, okay, well, Josh did it this way during his journey. Like one of the chapters is how not to raise capital, So I talked about, some of my experiences, and I never purposely went out and tried to raise capital in the sense of like doing the pitch meetings and things like that. Ironically, capital kind of came to me. So, I think and I don't say that in a kind of like a braggy way. It's just customers said, hey, can we invest in your company? We like what you're doing. If you're interested, let us know. But as far as the stories, I think there's a lot of relatable stories in there that hopefully anyone that's going through anything tough or traumatic or challenging can relate to and see that there's tools that I provide in there that can help them get through those challenging moments. And I'm pretty raw in how I share some of the challenging moments I had, from getting bullied in middle school, which a lot of people find hard to believe. So you broke the school record in tackles, but you were scared to walk down the hallway in 7th grade. Something's not adding up there, So the things that you have to go through and the person you kind of have to become, I think that's some valuable lessons throughout the book. But overall, I just think it's a fun read. I have friends that claim that they haven't read books in 10, 15 years, and they said they couldn't put it down. Like one person on the Amazon review said the person next to him on the plane said, that book must be amazing because you literally haven't gotten up to go to the bathroom, looked anywhere. And I do believe that it was written in a way in my voice to help get you through the chapters. Because I have this rule now, if a book sucks, like in 20 pages, I'm done. Like
don't finish it just for the sake of finishing it. Right.
So, anyone that's listening, I will stand by this. If it sucks, I'll buy you a beer. Text me or self-pour Josh on Instagram. If it sucks, I will buy you a beer. I do believe it's written in a way that you'll enjoy it. You may want to go to Austria after you read it. You may want to visit Minneapolis, maybe even Ireland. Those are some of the places I've traveled and wrote about in the book. But it's a fun book. I think it's not a super businessy book, and it's also takes you through a range of emotions.
And so we'll link to the book and point people in the right direction in the show notes at frontrodads.com. Josh, one last question, man, for you. Prior to joining Front Row Dads, we knew each other and you had a lot of friends. You know a lot of people. Like you said, you're very outgoing. It's not difficult to be a friend with you. You're likable, you're talented, you add value to the conversation. You ask big questions. Why Front Row Dads? Like, why did, you weren't shy on people in your life. So why Front Row Dads?
It's tough to wrap that into one specific answer. I would say it was a few things that I've recognized that you'd said through your podcast and just in our conversations, because what you pay for, you pay attention to. I think that's maybe something you've said or I've heard from somewhere. And it sounds kind of, it sounded kind of silly on the front end, like, oh, you're going to pay to have friends. That seems, weird, but I wouldn't say you're paying for friends. You're paying for tools, and paying for like-minded people that want to continue to improve in that area. Not, I don't want to say like hyper performer, ultra marathon type necessarily, but it's like, it's people that want to put energy into that space and get better. And without sounding like a regurgitator, there's so many lessons just from conversations with other Front Row Dads that I've shared with other dads who struggle in those areas so immensely. And they apply just some of the basic things that I've gotten from the group and conversations. And I even saved like Telegram conversations to reflect on, because I know that even though I might not be experiencing that situation today, I will. And when I do, I want to, it's a little more difficult to go back into the Telegram and find that conversation.
Sure.
So I think it's just hearing and seeing what other dads are challenged with, and husbands. And just even little reminders. Like I use this example all the time. Like I think one time you said, you sent it out to the group and you said, send a picture of your wife from a few years ago, tell her how it makes you feel, that moment where you were, and just, it's a random text message. And sure enough, like I did it, because that's what you do. And she was like, it was a picture of my wife in Aruba, and like the hair, it was not like a posed picture, it was just like a random snapshot. And I was like, oh, I like how you didn't even pose for this. And it was like, it's probably one of the most beautiful pictures I've ever seen. And, she was like, that was random, but you just made my day, so like reminding yourself that not that you need to do those things, but you forget to do those things if you're not triggered, and I'm sure you could set up reminders and things like that, but having a group of real people who do want to continue to be present in those areas. And especially what was a cool conversation was like, what's the next step? Front row granddads? Because like, we're all going to keep getting older, and then our kids will have kids. So, but it's, to wrap that up, I definitely, it was the intention to improve in that area, recognizing that there's always room for improvement. And even today, I'm sure if someone did an audit of my dadhood and husbandhood, if you will, I don't know. I probably wouldn't give myself an A in both, but maybe it is. But just knowing that I want to continue to be better in those areas.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that, man. Anything else you want to say to the guys out there listening? Anything we didn't get to that you want to mention?
No, I mean, it's, I guess if you're considering, taking a next step, I think in the dad department or the husband department, I think it's, comparison's the thief of joy. I think anyone that's comparing themselves to someone else's life, don't. And I think asking yourself, what can I do today that's going to create space for me to enjoy the day, or your partner or your kids. And all the other, I don't know, kind of a weird closing thought is like, I always try to remind myself of that quote. I think Maya Angelou said is, people will forget what you say. They'll forget what you do. They'll never forget how you make them feel. And I always try to remind myself that around my kids, around my wife, around my coworkers, my friends, because I want to be that guy that makes people feel good. So
appreciate that, Josh. I see you that way, man. And I appreciate you, how you show up for your family, for the brotherhood, and for the world. Gentlemen listening, the book is called Tap the Big Idea, Creating a New Category in the World's second oldest industry, and second being in parentheses there. Anyway, I want you to go pick up a copy and check it out. If you're in the brotherhood, please reach out to Josh directly and share your insights on the book. In fact, brothers in Front Row Dads, if you have a podcast, then consider inviting Josh onto the show and having a conversation with him for your audience. But Josh, thank you so much, man, for being here. I look forward to seeing you when you're in Austin in person. Maybe we can sit in the sauna. Maybe we'll go grab some food. Maybe we'll go see one of your restaurants and pour our own beverage when we're there. But whatever it is, man, it'll be a good time. And I love you very much, man. Grateful for you in my life. So thanks for being here today.
You're the man, John, and I will be taking you up on that offer. I don't know what the time span is for a guest allowed to hang out in your sauna is, but I tend to push that as far as I can.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll see you soon, brother. Be well.